It was very uplifting to me to see his name on there. It was.
They put their lives on the line for our freedom.
The women are all in high heels and skirts running across the tarmac and going into a bunker.
Into a bunker.
And we hid there.
And sometimes what they saw still haunts them to this day.
That was a genocide. Our primary mission was to open the airfield so that the humanitarian relief supplies could be flown in.
But the men and women in uniform managed to come together.
We printed out the maps for the bombing missions in Vietnam.
To get the job done.
Had you been a mechanic before the Air Force?
No. I had been in retail sales before that, before I went into service.
Some were sworn to secrecy.
Confidential. What's inside here?
These are his flight records of his missions. What occurred on the missions.
And others paved the way for future generations to come.
I realized I'm unique because there's not a whole lot of women veterans from the Vietnam era.
WATE 6 on Your Side is honored to share these veteran stories right now on Veterans Voices, proudly sponsored by Food City.
Good evening, I'm Elena Verdine, and thank you for joining us for this Veterans Voices special and stories about veterans told by our own Don Dare, himself a veteran. From the earliest days of our country's history through the wars that have defined our role in the world today, veterans have played an essential part in shaping our country and ensuring freedom. A friend of a World War II sailor killed in action noticed that his name was missing from the Veterans Memorial Park in Knoxville. But as Don Dare shows us, the name Herbert Colquitt is on that memorial today.
The East Tennessee Veterans Memorial in Knoxville's World's Fair Park bears the names of more than 6,200 veterans from 35 East Tennessee counties who died in military service since the beginning of World War I. Each pylon contains roughly 220 names randomly listed from each county. The memorial was dedicated in 2008, but missing from pylon 14 for 16 years was the name of a World War II sailor, Herbert R. Colquitt.
It was very uplifting to me to see his name on there. It was, and it is.
Mike Colquitt and his wife Jewel tell the story of how Herbert's name was added to the memorial. Jewel's uncle, Jimmy Monroe, and Herbert Colquitt were childhood friends, and both had joined the Navy, Herbert as a teenager.
I mean, to think that when I was 19, I had a young wife and 2 children.
The remaining Colquitt family posed for this picture in 1951, 6 years after they had returned from the war. Their names and Herbert's are on this certificate issued by the National World War II Museum and sent to Michael.
And I think back on what these men contributed, what they contributed to our freedom. And a lot of it now is just taken for granted.
Herbert Colquitt never came home. His ship, the USS Luce, a destroyer, was attacked by a Japanese kamikaze aircraft during the Battle of Okinawa, May 4, 1945. Herbert and 125 other sailors perished when the ship sank. Among the hundreds of names on the Veterans Memorial in Knoxville, Herbert's name originally was not among them. When Jimmy Monroe, Herbert's childhood friend, and Jewel Colquitt's uncle learned of the omission, Jimmy reached out to the family.
He was in his 90s, and he was actually crying, wanting to know why Herbert's name wasn't on the memorial. And so Mike found out about it and had his name put up there.
Seeing his name on the memorial, what does that mean for the family?
For me, it's almost unbearably to know that he gave his life. But James Monroe and these other men to know, they never knew that. They never saw his name on there.
Mike's surname, Colquitt, is familiar to many University of Tennessee football fans. 4 Colquitts were punters and played in the NFL. There's Mike's son, Jimmy. Next to him is his younger cousin, Britton. Then there's Britton's father, Craig, and to the far right is Dustin, Craig's other son. Among them, Craig, Dustin, and Britton all have Super Bowl rings. But it's the name engraved in this memorial that brings the Colquitts special pride. Herbert R. Colquitt.
The East Tennessee Veterans Memorial stands as his enduring legacy and as a tribute to the brave men and women of East Tennessee. And women have a long history of serving in the military, and they are now integrated into all kinds of roles. And no matter how long ago they served, Don tells us about an Air Force veteran who continues to serve today.
I was planning to have this done yesterday and just didn't get around to it.
Kathleen Van Orsdale is a skilled artisan. She designs and creates three-layered textile works of art, quilts. Kathleen is an Air Force veteran and is seen here playing the bugle.
Ready! Aim!
She's one of 3 female veterans presently giving volunteer duty to the East Tennessee Veterans Honor Guard. The unit presided over 300 funerals last year.
It thrills me that I am able to go and do a final farewell to someone who has served my country. But I think every one of us that goes out realizes that that individual deserves every bit of respect and honor that we, as an honor guard, can give them.
Kathleen joined the U.S. Air Force in 1964 at the beginning of the Vietnam War. She was 19 at the time.
I realized I'm unique because there's not a whole lot of women veterans from the Vietnam era. There's more women in military today, but back in the 60s there weren't.
As a former airman and mom, she has a special passion of using her talents to make quilts of valor. At this event in White Pine, the recipient is an Iraq War veteran.
He's one of the younger ones, and our veteran today is Kevin Gilliam. Come on down.
Kevin Gilliam first served in the U.S. Coast Guard, then in the U.S. Army as a member of the 82nd Airborne, where he was deployed to Iraq. Many veterans in the audience were wowed by Kathleen's artistry.
That corner, yep.
Wow, that's pretty. That's beautiful. That's nice. Thank you very much.
Kevin, you happen to have one of my quilts. This is one that I made for a veteran, and I'm just so pleased to be able to present it to you.
She's very special. She means a lot to us, and everything she's done in the service and after service.
Why don't you turn around? And I told him, I said, of all weekends to have a stiff neck, and he is so tall.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your service, Kevin.
Kathleen and her crew have created and designed dozens of quilts of valor, and she doesn't plan on stopping.
Thank you, Kevin, for your service. God bless America.
Thank you.
For Kathleen Van Orsdale, there's nothing better than making a veteran happy.
Absolutely, and we thank Kathleen for putting smiles on veterans' faces. Well, when World War II broke out, many men about to graduate from high school or college joined the service immediately, and Bill Klein was one of them. Don says Bill's son, Doug, has audio recordings of his father's flights while serving in the Pacific.
Confidential. What's inside here?
These are his flight records of his missions. What occurred on the missions?
Doug Klein's dad left behind a treasure trove of flight diaries. Following his commander's orders, he wrote in detail flight information during his 38 combat missions in the Pacific.
This is just part of them. I've got about 4 or 5 other folders full.
Army Air Corps Second Lieutenant Bill Klein served as a navigation bombardier aboard a B-25 in the Pacific from 1942 through 1945. Like others his age, when war broke out, he left school and signed up immediately.
Pearl Harbor happens. Within a matter of weeks, my father dropped out of Colgate and put himself up in the coming draft for the Army Air Corps.
It was the fall of 1942 when he finished navigation and bombardier training that took him across the country.
California, Alabama, Texas, South Carolina, all documented in his diaries.
That personal diary is another bit of memorabilia Bill left behind, which is now treasured by his family.
And I was lucky enough in the box full of memorabilia to find my father's dog tags.
Also found were patches worn in his uniform. There was his air medal with 2 oak leaf clusters. It was Doug's son who found his grandfather's war material hidden away.
She said, "You got to see this." And did you know that Grandpa actually read his own diary of his missions onto a cassette recorder? So Grandpa's reading his own missions.
Here is the cassette Bill used describing in detail a few of his missions. Listen.
We took off at 0640 in the dark, flew singly up the west coast of Luzon.
It's like you're in the plane with him. He knew the exact number of P-38s that were behind him or in front of him.
Our targets were to be trains, single passes to be made at low level. We picked up the main rail line and followed it north. I saw on the ground, north and east of Kagi, 2 clouds of smoke, one white, one black, with small tracers popping. That was, unfortunately, a B-25 of 71st.
When you heard your father's voice describing this,
the true hero that he never talked about came out.
Huge rolls of smoke were rising all over. We flew right through one of these, strafing everything that came along.
The voice of veteran Bill Klein, who passed away in 2001. But he and his wife, the late Joyce Turner Klein, who waited 2 years for her husband to come home from war, were married for 62 years. Oh, and Bill's college diploma from Colgate was mailed to him in 1945.
And thousands of veterans like Bill Klein, who were about to graduate before World War II, received their diplomas after the war, and some schools even held special ceremonies. Coming up on this Veterans Voices special, Steve Ball joined the Army as a private, but ended his career in charge of the Army's culinary school. We'll have this story next. Welcome back to our Veterans Voices special. Military jobs in the armed services range from combat roles like infantry and pilots to the support jobs like mechanics and cooks. That's right, someone has to feed the men and women in the field, at sea, and at home. And as Don Dare explains, one of those cooks rose to the highest enlisted rank in the U.S. Army.
Okay, so catering today. All right, how many people are we doing?
Steve Ball continues to do what he's always done, lead others as a culinary specialist. At East Tennessee Children's Hospital, he not only is in charge of the entire kitchen staff, he's the facility's executive chef, responsible for the dietary needs of the entire hospital. Steve is a retired Command Sergeant Major in the Army's Quartermaster Corps and Food Service Operation, where he cooked meals and worked alongside others to prepare food comparable to any major restaurant.
A couple of my large garrison dining facilities, we fed 500 per meal.
And here it's how many?
We feed about 80 patients per meal, and then for the family and staff, we feed about 200 at lunch.
Steve joined the Army in 1984 at Fort Knox, Kentucky, where he first tasted a strange dish.
Yes, that's when I came into basic training, and I discovered what grits were. I was from Massachusetts. I didn't know what grits were.
Having been a college graduate, Steve rose through the ranks quickly with many overseas duties.
My first assignment in Belgium was working for the Supreme Allied Commander of Europe as one of his personal cooks.
A personal cook?
Yes.
At mid-career, he volunteered to be a drill sergeant, a soldier who many enlistees fear.
So that was probably the most fun I had in the Army. It's also the hardest I ever worked.
Hardest? Why?
That's a get up at 3 a.m., come home maybe at 9, 10 o'clock at night.
In 1990, Steve wrote a 4-page magazine article for the Association of the U.S. Army, the title, A Roadblock in Rwanda.
Yes, I wrote that when I was a student at the Sergeant Major's Academy. That was supposed to be a humanitarian mission. When we got there, the airport wasn't open. There wasn't any water for people to wash with. There was a lot of sickness and death, and that was a genocide.
Among his 16 different assignments in 20 years was that of a brigade food service supervisor.
We could serve over 1,800 soldiers off of 2 mobile kitchen trailers. We could give them a hot breakfast and a hot dinner, and then they would have the operational ration, the MRE, for lunch.
Bosnia, 98, 99, that was not an easy assignment.
I was in a headquarters battery, so I was not working in food. This was not a humanitarian deployment, this was a peacekeeping deployment. So we were in full battle rattle, we call it. The helmet, the flak jacket, locked and loaded when we went off the camp. We had to be ready for anything.
The Army's Quartermaster Corps inducted Steve into its Hall of Fame in 2024. Steve's dad was in the Army Quartermaster Corps in Korea. Steve's son, a West Point graduate, was also in the Quartermaster Corps. Steve ended his career as Command Sergeant Major of the Army's Culinary School.
I think today's soldiers are probably the most operationally experienced we've ever had. Okay.
And Steve Ball likely trained and fed many of those soldiers, just as he continues feeding many people at East Tennessee Children's Hospital.
And leaders at the hospital say they are fortunate to have a chef like Steve with so much experience. And in between World War II and the Vietnam War was Korea, often called the Forgotten War. Nearly 2 million men and women saw duty in South Korea, and as Don Dare reports, Bill Martin, who joined the Air Force, fixed airplanes.
Where we're flying to is secret, but what we're flying in is not.
The planes flying information are C-47s. The sturdy two-engine prop plane was called the workhorse in World War II. 5 years later, they saw duty in Korea. Bill Martin was a mechanic who kept the C-47s flying for his squadron during the Korean War. He had never touched an engine before joining the U.S. Air Force in 1950. Mr. Martin is now 97 years old.
When you go in the service, they give you a battery of tests, and they determine from that what is your best field of work. And they determined that mine would have been mechanic.
Had you been a mechanic before the Air Force?
No. I had been in retail sales before that, before I went in the service.
Mr. Martin spent half a year learning how to fix C-47s and other aircraft.
Yeah, we had 51 of them, and we had a B-17. And the B-17 was what we used to transport Syngman Rhee around in.
Syngman Rhee, the first president of the Republic of Korea, led his country through the war. Bill says his plane had to be in tip-top shape.
The main problem was trying to procure parts.
Really?
Yeah, we'd have to fly all over trying to get parts, you know, to keep them going.
Keeping the planes mechanically sound, then Staff Sergeant Martin and his maintenance crew had a big responsibility.
I don't want to brag on myself, but I had sort of a knack of how to find numbers and how to get parts.
Your skills with numbers paid off.
Right. I was one of the only people, I guess, that over there that had two what they call MOSs. I was a mechanic and a supply sergeant. So I did both.
The military medals he earned prove his performance was exemplary. So skilled and in demand, Mr. Martin was recruited by Capital Airlines when he left the Air Force in 1954. Later into the jet age, he worked for United Airlines until retirement in 1992.
Well, how are you, Mr. Martin?
I am very good.
I'm Bob McAndrew. I heard you were a mechanic.
Yep.
Bob McAndrew and Ed Junod from Vet to Vet, Tennessee, a support group, surprised Mr. Martin with a special commemoration. It's the Ambassador for Peace Award from the South Korean people. Mr. McAndrew read from the proclamation.
We cherish in our hearts the memory of your boundless sacrifices in helping us reestablish our free nation.
Bill Martin was then presented with the Special Korean Medal. Ever so humble, which is his nature, Bill was at a loss for words.
Congratulations, Bill.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Bill Martin, Korean War veteran and Ambassador of Peace Award recipient.
And Mr. Martin lives in Blount County with his wife of nearly 70 years and his family. We'll be right back. During the Vietnam War, service members traveled to and from the war zone on chartered jets. A retired flight attendant tells Don Dare what it was like flying back to the States with some happy troops.
So this is about flying on World Airways.
At a recent book fair, former flight attendant Bobby Phelps talks about flying to and from Vietnam and writes about her unique experiences in her book, Behind the Smile. Beginning in 1965, she started working for World Airways, a key military contractor flying troops in and out of the war zone in Vietnam. Attendants then had to be single, a certain height, weight, age, and fashionably dressed.
What a great time we had for the 6 years I was flying, except for the scary moments in Vietnam.
One of those frightening moments came during the Tet Offensive, when the North Vietnamese Army and the Viet Cong launched a surprise attack beginning January 30th, 1968. That day, World Airways was bringing a plane load of GIs from the States to Da Nang, South Vietnam.
Flak was flying at us, and as soon as we landed, a military man came up and yelled at everyone to get off the airplane. We as crew members just stayed on the airplane doing the rest of our end-of-flight duty, and that's when the fellow came back up and yelled at us again, "Get out, get out." And so we ran with him across the tarmac, and the women are all in high heels and skirts running across the tarmac and going into a bunker.
Into a bunker.
And we hid there.
But flights with celebrities like Anne Margaret made up for the anxious moments. The popular actress, singer, and dancer toured Vietnam with Bob Hope's USO Christmas show in December 1968. They entertained thousands of troops, and she flew on Bobby's flight into Saigon.
And she'd do a little dance at the top of the stairs. And she wore a little short white skirt and white boots and danced at the top, and the men below would just drop to their knees.
Singing cowboy Roy Rogers and his wife Dale Evans were familiar TV stars for those who served in Vietnam. The couple toured Vietnam with the USO and were on one of Bobby's flights.
They would sing on the airplane. It was wonderful, absolutely wonderful.
A sing-along with Roy and Dale.
Yes, and their cowboy group.
Taking the GIs to Vietnam, what was that like?
That was sad. They were very quiet, and I remember this, most of them were very young. Also, that would have been probably their first time on an international flight, and many had never even been on an airplane at all.
However, the flight home for American troops was quite different for the crew and the GIs.
And when we would actually take off, oh my gosh, they would put their fists in the air and yell and scream, and it was just so exciting. We're going home.
Today, when she shares time with Vietnam veterans, they have a special place in her heart.
I always go up to them. I always mention that I was there too. No one talks about the bad times. We only talk about the good times.
Bobby Phelps, author and former flight attendant who served veterans.
And Bobby says those flights were some of the most memorable of her long career with World Airways. Well, in the stories that you have seen, the voices of these veterans and flight attendant carry a common theme. They had a job to do, and they filled it with honor. I'm Elena Verdine. Thank you for watching.